On 5 News, a family's grief as a soldier dies in a training exercise in Brecon. Josh Hoole was due to get married. His family say he was a beautiful grandson. His death comes 3 years after 3 other soldiers died whilst training in the same area during sweltering conditions. Also, Theresa May arrives in Germany for Brexit talks with Angela Merkel. She's touched down in Berlin for her first foreign trip as Prime Minister, after earlier taking a dig at Jeremy Corbyn's leadership in her first Prime Minister's questions.
Maybe even a boss who exploits the rules to further his own career. Remind him of anybody?
Why patients who don't visit their GP for 5 years face being axed from their doctor's surgery.
Congratulations, Dad, we love you!
And Donald Trump is officially announced as the Republican presidential candidate with the help of his daughter.
He draws out the talent and drive in people so that they can achieve their full potential. That's a great quality to have in a father, and better yet, in the President of the United States.
Welcome to 5 News. I'm Danny Sinha. The family of a soldier who died during a training exercise in Brecon in Wales say he was a beautiful grandson and a dedicated soldier. 26-year-old Josh Hoole from Lockerbie in Scotland had been taking part in training described as both mentally and physically demanding. It's not yet known how he died, and a police investigation has been launched. It comes after 3 soldiers died on an SAS training exercise in the Brecon Beacons on one of the hottest days of 2013. Julian Drucker reports from Brecon.
Corporal Josh Hoole was 26 and, in the words of his family, was a super fit boy. A young soldier who was due to get married shortly. On what became the hottest day of the year yesterday, he was preparing for intensive training on the Brecon Beacons. Completion of the course, described by the Army as both physically and mentally demanding, would have seen him promoted to the rank of sergeant. Police say they're now working with the Ministry of Defence to work out why he died so suddenly. Corporal Hoole was taking part in an exercise at the Infantry Training Centre here yesterday morning. It's believed he fell ill just before 6:30. At around 9 a.m, 2 ambulances and the Wales Air Ambulance arrived here to what they've described as a medical emergency. Remembering him, his stepmother wrote, "Rest easy, soldier. My beautiful stepson. Can't believe it." A fellow rifleman commented online, "A pleasure to serve alongside you, brother. Genuinely one of the nicest blokes I knew." And his grandfather simply wrote, "Heartbroken." The Brecon Beacons have witnessed military deaths before. On a similarly hot day in July 2013, 3 soldiers died of heat exhaustion. They were taking part in a 16-mile SAS selection course. At their inquests, the Ministry of Defence was said to have made a catalogue of very serious mistakes. Today, there were more questions for the Army.
The families of those who died in the previous Brecon incident, for them, it started all over again. And they must be thinking, has nobody learned any lessons? And again, it's back to my committee, my subcommittee, the Defence Select Committee. We'll be going back and calling the Ministry of Defence in and saying, OK, what have you done? How much of our recommendations have you implemented? Did you learn the lessons? How did this happen on yet again the hottest day of the year?
Corporal Hoole had experienced 2 tours of Afghanistan and had been to Iraq. Police and the armed forces are now examining why this popular and dedicated soldier died. Well, there is still so much we don't know about what happened. This is the town, of course, where those 3 soldiers died 3 years ago. But what happened here appears to have been quite different. Corporal Hoole wasn't in the mountains when he died, but he was here. And the course he would have gone on to do would have been less strenuous than the one those 3 soldiers died on. But make no mistake, it still would have been extremely difficult. It goes on for 7 weeks or so. Tonight, there are questions about the sort of pre-course training that goes on here and the extent to which the temperature yesterday had an effect, if at all.
Julian in Brecon, thank you very much. Theresa May has faced MPs at her first Prime Minister's questions and used the opportunity to fire jibes at Labour, and Jeremy Corbyn in particular. Referring to the infighting among his party's ranks, she likened the Labour leader to an unscrupulous boss. Well, in the last hour, she's actually arrived in Berlin on her first overseas trip as Prime Minister for talks with German Chancellor Angela Merkel. Here's our political correspondent, Andy Bell.
No wonder they are putting on a show. The two most powerful women in Europe are meeting for the first time. And their relationship could determine just how Britain negotiates to leave the EU. Before she set off for Germany, Theresa May laid out for Parliament the principles of that negotiation.
I'm very clear Brexit does mean Brexit. As he says, we will make a success of it. What we need to do in negotiating the deal is to ensure that we listen to what people have said about the need for controls on free movement, but we also negotiate the right deal and the best deal of trade in goods and services for the British people.
Her predecessor also saw the German Chancellor as a key point in his Europe policy, but EU watchers say this Prime Minister shouldn't expect too much too quickly.
I wouldn't have too many expectations on content, but at least setting the framework. If we can get some idea of that, then we won't be so much in the dark on this side of the channel.
Today was also Theresa May's first Prime Minister's questions, and she was welcomed by the Labour leader.
I hope that she will agree with me that this House and Prime Minister's question time should be an opportunity to debate seriously the issues that face our country and our place in the world.
Well, it didn't turn out that way, as Theresa May turned a question about unscrupulous bosses back on him, with more than a hint of Britain's only other female Prime Minister.
A boss who doesn't listen to his workers? A boss who requires some of his workers to double their workload? A boss, and maybe even a boss, who exploits the rules to further his own career. Remind him of anybody?
But for all the fun and games in Parliament, this is Theresa May's most important encounter of the day. This relationship may count far more for the Prime Minister in the end.
Andy, what can we expect to come out of these talks that are happening between Theresa May and Angela Merkel?
Well, the German government's very clear. There can be no formal negotiations until Britain triggers Article 50. That is, starts the formal process, the two-year process of Britain leaving the EU. But between conversations and negotiations, there is a whole grey area, which I'm sure Theresa May will hope to exploit in hoping to find out perhaps what the broad outlines of any deal that could be acceptable to Germany might be. Also, frankly, trying to establish some sort of rapport, some sort of relationship with the most powerful politician in Europe, the German Chancellor, Angela Merkel, because the two have never met before, certainly not in any official capacity. So that is what Theresa May will be trying to do this evening. Tomorrow she goes to France, where she will meet President Hollande, and that could be a lot trickier for her.
Andy, thank you very much. The Bank of England says business uncertainty has risen markedly since the UK voted to leave the EU, but it says there's no clear evidence of an economic slowdown. Well, it comes after the bank held back from cutting interest rates last month. And the number of people out of work has fallen to its lowest level for 8 years. The employment rate is now more than 74%. Now, if you haven't visited your GP for 5 years, you could soon be removed from their surgery list. It's an attempt by the NHS to save on the money they pay GPs for every patient. But critics say it could mean some of the most vulnerable people are actually cut off from services. Frankie McCamley has more details.
Often you go into your GP surgery with questions and out with answers. And for every patient signed up, practices on average are paid £136 each year. But the NHS wants to make sure surgeries are not being overpaid for patients who, for one reason or another, don't visit the surgery anymore. So NHS England has devised a plan to get rid of so-called ghost patients from surgeries like this one in Doncaster. They've hired a private company to find out whether patients no longer need their services because they've moved house, moved abroad, or in some cases passed away. That initiative will target patients who have not seen their GP for 5 years. Each will be sent 2 letters. If they don't respond to either letter, the patient will be deregistered. A person then wanting to get back onto a list would have to reapply through the normal process. It's not clear how many patients are registered incorrectly, but 3 years ago, NHS bosses estimated as many as 5% of the GP register population might be wrong. And there are concerns with the new plans.
There may be quite a large drop in income to practice, and that income is used as a resource to help care for patients. So if that is reduced, of course that will mean either a reduction in services for patients or even practice closures.
Until now, it has been up to local areas to come up with their own ways of keeping lists up to date.
I think a blanket approach of this nature means that some patients, vulnerable patients, will be caught up in it. And not all patients can read English that well. Not all patients can understand what these letters are telling them. So patients who are a bit older and who have mental health issues maybe not understand what's expected of them. So it needs to be a more sensitive system.
I think it's a pretty good idea. They can't keep people on the system if they've moved abroad or if maybe they've died.
But the older people, I think there should be somebody go and see them to say this is what's going to happen.
It's wasting their time if you've got people on record and they don't know they still exist. They can put the funds somewhere else, can't they?
Plans are being rolled out next month, so if you haven't been here in a while, check your post or the GP's doors may be closed next time. Frankie McCamley, 5 News.
Still to come on the programme. The Labour leadership challenger Owen Smith tells us his party could be wiped out if it sticks with Jeremy Corbyn. Why some parents might find it hard to find childcare places this summer. And why Donald Trump's presidential bid has become a family affair. All that and much more after the break. Welcome back. You're watching 5 News. Labour's deadline for registering to vote in the party's leadership contest has closed in the last hour. Well, having lost the confidence of many of his MPs, Jeremy Corbyn is now facing a challenge from former Shadow Work and Pensions Secretary Owen Smith. Mr. Smith has told us the party will be wiped out if Mr. Corbyn is re-elected. Layla Hayes reports.
So good of you all to come.
He's fighting to keep his job, and Jeremy Corbyn now knows who he must fight against. Owen Smith is now the sole challenger and says he's the man to unite the Labour Party and prevent a catastrophic split.
I've said to Jeremy face to face that we are in danger right now, a clear and present danger of the Labour Party splitting and being wiped out from history. We've got no right to exist as a Labour Party. Parties take a long time to rise, they can disappear overnight. We've got to unite the Labour movement.
Owen Smith was born in Morecambe, Lancashire, but grew up in the Welsh town of Barry. Before entering politics, he worked for 10 years as a BBC radio producer. He later became a lobbyist for the pharmaceutical giant Pfizer and has denied accusations that he favoured more privatisation for the NHS while he was there. 6 years ago, he became the MP for Pontypridd and has served as Shadow Welsh Secretary as well as Shadow Work and Pensions Secretary. He now wants to be Labour leader. But beating Jeremy Corbyn isn't going to be easy. He was voted in less than a year ago with an overwhelming majority, and today he was urging Labour supporters to sign up and vote for him again.
Together, we can change the way we do our politics.
Jeremy Corbyn believes he has the support of members, but he's lost the support of most Labour MPs. Margaret Beckett voted against him in last month's vote of no confidence and says the party is at crisis point.
I've devoted my whole life to the Labour Party. I don't want to see it go down. But it's the impact on the country that really alarms me, because if there's no strong opposition to this government, they'll walk all over everybody.
Owen Smith says he has what it takes to be Labour leader and has offered to make Jeremy Corbyn party president if he wins. But for now, Jeremy Corbyn is vowing to fight on. Layla Hayes, 5 News.
Turkey has charged 99 army generals over last weekend's coup attempt. More than 50,000 people have been detained, sacked or suspended from their jobs. They're suspected of having links to US-based cleric Fethullah Gulen, who President Erdogan has accused of masterminding that coup. Police say the deaths of a man and woman at a block of flats in Aberdeen are now being treated as murder. A second man also fell from the 19-storey high-rise in the Tillydrone area last night. Detectives say they're not looking for anyone else in connection with the deaths. Now, if you're one of the millions of people having to sort out childcare this summer, then you might not be surprised to hear it's actually getting harder and indeed more expensive. A new report has found councils across the UK don't have enough places, whilst costs for parents and carers have soared over the last 6 years. Warren Nettleford has been finding out what parents think.
School is almost out for summer. This play centre in London is just about to open its doors to older children during the holidays. Up and down the country, parents rely on places like this to stimulate and care for their children. Parents here told us why they're so important.
You meet new people, meet new moms, meet new kids, and so it means if there's fewer places like that, there also becomes much harder for parents and families to have good support.
They need as much funding as they can for these places. It prepares them for school, and if they are at school, it gives them something to do.
We would have to try and find a childminder, but how can you find a childminder just for 1 week in a year when everybody else is competing?
Summer play schemes are vital, but across Britain it seems, parents now face a double whammy of increasing costs and fewer services. On average across the UK, a week of childcare during the summer costs £121. That's slightly down from last year, but it's still 22% higher than 2010. It's now harder to find childcare spaces too. Almost 90% of councils in England that responded to the poll said they do not have enough holiday childcare to meet demand. 78% of councils in Scotland said the same. All of the councils in Wales admitted to having a problem.
In maintaining a certain level of work or being able to continue working at all, and ultimately at a larger picture that has a negative impact on the economy if more and more parents are finding it difficult to work.
Councils may be struggling to match demand, and the government admit they have lots to do, but they've also stressed other ambitious targets, investing an extra £1 billion a year nationally towards free childcare for 3- and 4-year-olds by 2020. But this summer, those who don't gain a play scheme place may be missing opportunities that could determine their futures. Warren Nettleford, 5 News.
13 months after launching his unlikely bid for the White House, Donald Trump has finally secured the Republican nomination for US president. His controversial campaign has caused a rift in the party, but delegates at the National Convention have been urged to unite behind him. And his supporters have continued their attacks on likely Democrat nominee Hillary Clinton. Minnie Stevenson has more.
Congratulations, Dad! We love you!
It's official. The Republican Party's nominated Donald Trump to be their man to run for US president, beating 16 rival candidates with what Trump claims is the largest majority in the party's history. Cue a giant image of their chosen one, beamed into the Cleveland Arena via satellite link from Trump Tower in New York City.
I'm so proud to be your nominee for President of the United States. I look forward to sharing my thoughts with you on Thursday night on how we build a brighter and more hopeful future.
Tiffany Trump. Trump's children were also on hand to deliver herograms for their dad.
His desire for excellence is contagious. He possesses a unique gift for bringing that trait out in others, starting with those closest to him.
For my father, impossible is just the starting point. That's how he approaches business projects. That's how he approaches life.
And it may only be day 2 of the Republican National Convention, but critics say things are already getting nasty, with New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, a former prosecutor, even staging a mock trial for Democratic frontrunner Hillary Clinton.
Guilty or not guilty?
It comes after Hillary was interviewed by the FBI for using her own private email account as Secretary of State instead of an official one. US commentators say, make no mistake, Team Trump will continue to speak their minds.
Trump is outspoken. You know, he'll talk up America. He'll talk down enemy countries. But the third thing he has is his kids. You know, he'll want to show people that he's actually this loving father. He's not the gruff businessman and the misogynist and what have you.
All eyes will be on Donald Trump tomorrow night, when he delivers his first major speech as the official Republican candidate. The man who wants to be president will make his case for a place in history and the White House. Minnie Stevenson, 5 News.
Well, on 5 News tonight at 6:30, we'll actually be live in Ohio for the latest reaction to that extraordinary convention. I'm also going to be speaking to a GP about those plans to drop patients who haven't seen their doctor for 5 years. Well, that's all from us for now, though. Sean Welby has the weather next, and I'm going to be back in an hour's time. From all of us here, have a lovely evening. Bye-bye.